Louisiana. Representative Scalise, congratulations. Quite the heavy lift last week, and I didn't know that you could get it done. Congratulations on getting it done.
Thanks, Hugh. A lot of people were questioning whether we could get it done, but, my attitude always was failure's not an option. We have got to get this done. Too many people are struggling across the country, and we said we would do this, and this is a promise we had to follow through on. We sent the bill to the Senate, so, it's the first step. It's not over, but, we've proved how you can actually put together a coalition of conservatives and moderates to free people from the shackles of Obamacare and, let the Senate go and take it from here. But the fact that, look, you can actually choose your own health care under our bill. Premiums will go down. You'll actually have a real competitive marketplace. And despite what the liberal media is saying and lying about this bill, people with pre-existing conditions who have health insurance today cannot be denied coverage and can't be charged more than anybody else. That's not, they keep trying to make that a component of the bill, and it's not. So those protections
let's pause on that, because yesterday you said, and I was so glad, actually I think you said it on MSNBC on Friday, and this is important for people to understand, anybody who's continuously covered gets priced like everybody else, whether you have a pre-existing condition or not. If you have a plan today and you have a pre-existing condition and you stay on that plan, your rates are not going to go up. You can even move to another plan. What you can't do is gap and come in when you get sick and expect to be treated like everybody else. Is that right, Steve Scalise?
That's exactly what is in the plan. And again, it's being misconstrued. It's being lied about. They show all these stories of families who have a kid with a pre-existing condition, just tragic stories, who have insurance today, and they're presenting it as if under our plan those people will lose their insurance, and it's not the case. Even if a state seeks a waiver, and we do allow states to seek waivers from some components of different mandates, but even if the state seeks a waiver, they cannot waive continuous coverage, meaning if you've got health insurance today and you're in a state that sought a waiver, no state can take away your protection for pre-existing condition. They cannot take that away.
That's
the media is still subjecting it as if it's the case.
And the fact that the media runs with this and the people are going to die, people are going to suffer. I did a debate with Paul Begala before the California Medical Association on Friday, and Paul's wonderfully skilled, talented soundbite thrower out, but it just ain't true. And I sat there, and the doctors in the audience knew, because I've been on a board in Orange County, California for 18 years dealing with the Medicaid population of 0 to 5 children. Medicaid does not get you care, Steve Scalise, and that's what the speaker was saying. You've been saying Medicaid is in collapse. Obamacare is in collapse. This is a rescue mission.
Yeah. If you think emergency room visits are health care, that's not the way. First of all, President Obama promised that you wouldn't have to keep going to the emergency room to get health care. And, of course, more people now are having to go to emergency rooms because very few doctors take new Medicaid patients. So even if you're on Medicaid and you were part of the expansion, it's the worst form of health care in the entire country. So what we did is actually shifted Medicaid over to a block grant. So if you're on Medicaid today, the amount of money is going to stay the same, but we actually control the growth of it because we let the governors do what they've been begging us to do for decades, and that is to have full control over the program. They're typically state-managed programs, but all the rules come out of Washington. And, the regulations and the things we want to do to help our low-income people in Louisiana are a lot different than the population in California or New York. So why should the rules all be coming out of Washington? Why shouldn't the states be able to control and manage the low-income populations in their states, which they can do a lot better than Washington?
And I think the devolution of Medicaid is the most important aspect of this bill. I know getting rid of the individual mandate is important. Getting rid of the taxes will free up the medical device industry. The Cadillac tax is great. It sets the baseline for tax reform. But to me, Medicaid devolution is going to deliver health care to more millions of poor Americans than they ever imagined once we get D.C. out of the business of deciding how Orange County or Louisiana Parish ought to be doing its health care. Whip Scalise, let's move on to what's ahead. I do not think it's a bad thing that the Senate does its own version. That's the way the Constitution intends it to work. You'll have a conference committee. In the meantime, what's next on the House agenda this summer?
Well, the House will then start going into the budget. We've got to do another budget. We've got to finish this budget reconciliation bill first. So the House and Senate need to come to an agreement on a final Obamacare repeal and replace. And then we start the next budget, and that brings us into tax reform, as you mentioned. And, of course, that's something that we're going to use budget reconciliation to do as well, because it means you only need 51 votes in the Senate. So Chuck Schumer can't hijack it over in the Senate with a 60-vote requirement. And what we want to do, and this is the most important thing for the economy, really, to get economic growth, we need to make America competitive again. And right now, with the highest corporate tax rate in the world, it's killing our middle class because you're seeing a lot of good jobs being forced overseas to countries like Ireland or Canada or wherever else that they can go get a 15% rate. So we're going to lower the rate dramatically for everybody.
That's the key thing. And there will, the Speaker has said before, and I don't know if it's still there, that there may be a repatriation window as well, which really incentivizes the return of American trillions of dollars of profits stashed in foreign accounts.
Over $2 trillion of American money that's in foreign countries that those companies like Apple want to bring $100 billion back. And America's thank you note to them is they're going to pop a 35% tax on their back so they don't bring the money back. Why don't we let them bring the money back to grow our economy here in America? And another important point, you talk about something conservatives have been pushing for decades, complete repeal of the death tax.
Yes, and so I'm looking for, I think there's a lot to do. I want to stay also, though, on the Congressional Review Act. You guys have done yeoman's work. 14 of these bills have passed. I believe the Paris Agreement, which was signed by President Obama in September of 2016, went into force in November of 2016, can be made the subject of a Congressional Review Act resolution and carried through the House to the Senate and let us start back where we ought to be with the legislature on global climate change. What is the status of the Paris Agreement and the CRA, Representative Scalise?
As you mentioned, we've already passed 14 CRAs that have been signed into law. And why this is important is it reverses an Obama regulation, reverses it, and in the future, no future administration can try to come up with another similar regulation like the war on coal. We reversed so many of those bad provisions that President Obama put in place in the war on coal, saving thousands of jobs all across the country. And so we're looking at more. There's a timing issue. Eventually, the clock runs out on each of these opportunities. So we're looking at which other ones we want to do. We're working with the administration because there's some things that they want to just reverse through the administrative state, but then there's some that we want to continue moving through this process. So we're going to keep working with them on that. And again, this is all part of restoring the balance of powers and bringing the power of the purse back to Congress. For so long, Congress, decades and decades, has been sending more powers away from Congress to the executive branch. And so whether you're Republican or Democrat president, there's a whole lot of control and power in the executive office. That's not the way our founding fathers intended it.
Absolutely not. On the specific issue of the Paris Agreement, can I get a commitment from you to at least look and see whether it's eligible? Speaker Ryan said he's going to look into it. I talked to some of his team members. We got to get out of that agreement. It's a killer.
I'll be happy to look into that because that's one more thing that's just going to kill our economy. You can't manufacture anything with these global warming agreements. In fact, the countries that sign them are trying to reverse it because they're unachievable. They're not. It's not real. And again, you're not relying even on real science. And so why don't we go look and see if that's one more thing that we can reverse and do one more thing to help grow our economy.
And when you say that does not make you a climate denier. Every Republican I know understands the actual science, the temperature rate hike, but they don't want to bankrupt the country in pursuit of false choices that will not work to reverse that warming.
Think about this, Hugh. If we were to have gone through with President Obama's global warming strategies and his cap and trade and all of these things they were doing through the EPA, you're literally shipping mountains of coal to foreign countries who, when they're making things in those foreign countries, Brazil, China, India, they emit 5 times the amount of carbon that we do here because we already had good environmental standards. So if you want to increase carbon in the atmosphere, then ship more of those manufacturing jobs to China and India and Brazil. It makes no sense. But look, Earth's temperature was cooler. The Earth's temperature was warmer 10,000 years ago when we didn't have a combustion engine. So these people that think they can control Mother Nature, the same people that couldn't build a website with $500 million of taxpayer money to take your health care order.
Let me close by talking about the military. A general, retired 2-star, wrote me from last week, $15 billion in the OCO, Overseas Contingency Operation, is not rebuilding the military. OCO is O&M operations, not recapitalization. And he's right. And I am worried about the sequester, Representative Scalise. I'm worried that we don't get one ship in this 4-month omnibus, not one new ship, and we got to get to 350 of President Trump. What is going to happen in the next 4 months? Are we going to get a detailed shipbuilding plan to get to a 350-ship Navy?
Well, that's going to be the next budget. We're going to actually get into how to truly rebuild our military. It's been a priority of President Trump's, and it's been a priority of ours. And, for years, President Obama just wound down the military. And OCO was used as a tool to kind of hold off a certain percentage of our budget, but at the same time, we've got to move it into base operations. And so I think you're going to see that debate play out over the next few weeks as we start the budget process. Diane Black and her committee, the budget committee, is going to be at the forefront of this, but the president has weighed in as well. And Mac Thornberry, the chairman of the Armed Services, he's been very vocal, and the leaders on his committee about how we need to rebuild the military. So like you said, we can actually do more long-term planning. We can actually rebuild a lot of the assets that have been depleted. We got to get back in that game, and now I think you're going to see that focus shift as we start the budget process.
Representative Steve Scalise, whip for the GOP caucus. Congratulations again. Thanks for spending so much time with me today. That was a big lift last week, a big win for the good guys, and on to the Senate and on to tax reform. Thank you for joining me.
Let's go get it done. Always great to be with you, Hugh.